Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Computer and IT Fundamental series. In this practical, we are going to perform basic authentication testing using a Windows Server Active Directory environment. We will create a test domain user, authenticate using that account, and then verify the authentication activity through Windows Event Viewer. Before starting the practical, let's quickly understand what authentication testing means. Authentication is the process of verifying the identity of a user. For example, when we enter a username and password, the system checks whether those credentials are valid. In authentication testing, we test both successful and unsuccessful login attempts. We also verify whether these authentication activities are properly recorded in the system logs. In this practical, we are going to demonstrate this using Active Directory and Windows Event Viewer. Now that we have understand what authentication testing is, let's see why it is important. First of all, authentication is one of the security controls protecting a system. If authentication is not working correctly, unauthorized users may be able to access systems or accounts. That's why we test both successful and failed authentication attempts. We also need proper logging because authentication logs help administrators investigate suspicious login activity. Now, let's move to our Windows Server lab and perform a simple authentication test. I am now inside my Windows Server virtual machine. For the first part, I am going to create a dedicated test domain account. Now, I have opened Active Directory users in computers. I'll go through users container and select new user. I'll create a user called test user. I'll assign a test password and complete the account creation. Now I'm using a separate test account so that I don't have to perform the demonstration using the administrator account. Now I'm opening Event Viewer and going to Windows Lock followed by Security. Now I'll filter the security log for event ID 4624 and look for the event generated. The event ID 4624 represents a successful logon. So this gives us evidence that a successful authentication event was recorded by our window. Next, I'll filter for event ID 4625 and look for the failed logon event generated around the time of our incorrect password attempts. Repeated or unusual 4625 events can be a security indicator that requires investigation. Now, these corresponds to the incorrect password attempts. In real security environment, repeated failed authentication events can be investigated for possible password guessing, brute force activity, or other suspicious behavior. Now let's connect this practical to a real world scenario. Imagine an employee reports that they notice an unexpected login to their account. The IT or security team can investigate the authentication logs and check successful and failed login events. They can review that account involved, the time of authentication, and whether there are repeated or unusual failed attempts. If the activity appears suspicious, the security team can take proactive action such as resetting credentials, reviewing access, or investigating the incident further. This is why authentication testing and authentication logging are important in an enterprise environment. So, in this part, we created a domain test account, tested both successful and failed authentication attempts, and verified the corresponding authentication events using Windows Event Viewer. This practical gave us a basic understanding of how authentication can be tested and monitored in an Active Directory environment. And with that, we have reached the end of our 13-part Computer and IT Fundamentals practical series. Thank you for watching and supporting the series. I hope these practicals helped you build a better understanding of fundamentals IT and cybersecurity concepts. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next series.